most important book that we're going to go over. And then, of course, Eat Like a Girl is something that I highly recommend for you girls out there that want to understand what we're talking about. Both of these books are a must read. So our talk is going to be around these two books. And so what we need to do is we need to go over some truths, and we need to understand what's really not so true with the obesity epidemic in our country. So we're going to start off with a couple things here, because one of the things that we always talk about are calories. We talk about, oh, if we take in a lot of calories, it's going to cause us to gain weight. So we say calories in is the food energy that we eat, right? Calories out are the energy expended for metabolic functions. But what we say is when the number of calories we take in exceeds the number of calories we burn, weight gain results. Is that true? Is that true when we're taking in too many calories that it's going to cause weight gain? Is it true? And we also say eating too much and exercising too little causes weight gain. Is that true? Another thing that we say is eating too many calories causes a weight gain. So these are really important facts. William Banting, back in 1796, he discovered that refined carbohydrates have fattening properties, like eating bread and rice, beer, sweets. So he found that losing weight, and he kept it off by eliminating those things. And so he believed that weight gain was from eating too many fattening carbs. This is back in the 1700s into the 1800s. So calorie counting started in the early 1900s with the first book, Eat Your Way to Health, by Dr. Robert Rose. So that's really interesting. We need to talk about that, because a lot of my patients are talking about eating too many calories and causing weight gain. So then all of a sudden the focus turns to coronary heart disease. And so then the focus started turning into cholesterol and low-fat diets. So low fat equals high carbohydrates. So we wanted to then go into keeping our diet at a low fat diet, because if we have heart disease, we need to eat less fat. Is that true? Is that something that we should be doing? John Yudkin, he lived from 1910 to 1995. He said there was no relationship between dietary fat and heart disease. He believed the culprit of obesity and heart disease was sugar. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, because dietary and lifestyle habits have changed since the 70s. And what do I mean by that? When we look at what has changed, we see there's, low fat, high carb diets, increased number of eating opportunities per day, more meals eating out, more fast food restaurants, more time in cars and vehicles, increased popularity of video games, the use of computers and cell phone, a lot of sugar, and then an increased use of high fructose corn syrup. Many of you probably don't even know what high fructose corn syrup is, so we need to talk about that. And then, of course, everybody seems to be eating more, so portion control sizes have increased. So obesity is the state of being fat to the point of having detrimental health consequences. And what's interesting is, in humans, evolution did not favor obesity, right? We favored the leanness, faster, stronger, quicker. If you're lean, you're able to hunt and gather easier. So we need to understand, why are we then seeing obesity at a higher level if we're working better when we're lean? Calories in minus calories out equal body fat. But when you talk about calories, does a calorie of olive oil have the same type of relationship as a calorie of sugar? Does the body react differently? Same amount of calories. If I take 10 calories of olive oil and 10 calories of sugar, they both have 10 calories. But is your body going to react the same way? So sugar will increase the blood glucose level and provoke an insulin response from the pancreas, but olive oil will not. So that's important because all calories are not equally likely to cause weight gain. Really important what I just said. All calories are not going to cause weight gain. So we need to go back to some science, back to some classes that we've taken in high school. And who remembers the first law of thermodynamics, which states energy can neither be created nor destroyed in an isolated system? That's important because if you eat 200 calories, what is it used for? How does our body use 200 calories? So we need to go through that because we need to understand when we take in a calorie, it can never be created, it can never be destroyed. So how is it actually dispersed in our body? Well, here you go. You have heat production, protein production, bone production, muscle production, brain function, increased heart rate, increased stroke volume, exercise, exertion, detoxification from the liver, the kidney, digestion, breathing. All of these things are included on how your body uses each calorie. So this is very important because the problem of fat accumulation is really a problem of how your body distributes out that energy. A problem of fat accumulation is how your body distributes out the energy. The body regulates how your energy is being used by hormones. Huge. Your body regulates how your energy is being used through your hormones. The body quickly responds to caloric reduction by reducing metabolism. But how long does that adaptation actually persist? So does the body increase its energy expenditure back to its previous higher level if a calorie reduction is maintained? So in other words, if I reduce calories in my body and I get down to a weight of 180, because I want to be at 180 pounds, but my body functions better at 200 pounds. If I reduce that calorie intake and I get down to 180 pounds, is my body going to want to get back up to the 200? Absolutely. So what does it do? And that's what we need to talk about here, because total energy expenditure. This is very, very, very important to understand, because your energy from that calorie that it's burning does different things. One of the biggest things that it does is it utilize how we breathe. That's called basal metabolic rate, our body temperature, our organ function, thermogenic effect of food. What does that mean? It means the energy required for digestion, absorption, disposal of ingested nutrients, non-exercise activity, how you digest your food, thermogenesis, the production of heat, plus excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, plus the exercise. So that is how your body actually utilizes the energy from a calorie when you take it in. So if a person consumes 2,500 calories a day and walks 2 miles for 45 minutes every day and burns 104 calories, this will not even consume 5% of the total energy expenditure. The majority, the 95% of calories that are used in our body come from basal metabolic rate, which means it comes from the breathing, the body temperature, and organ function. That's really important to understand, because we think if we exercise, it's going to help burn that fat, but 95% of how your body utilizes energy is more at the basal metabolic rate, which is your breathing, how your body temperature is regulated, your organ function. So when you reduce calorie consumption, it decreases the basal metabolic rate, which can affect organ function. And that's why it's really, really important to understand we shouldn't focus on reducing calorie intake. We should focus on resistance, and we're going to talk about what that means. So when you restrict calorie intake, you will briefly lose weight. So it is true. Take away the calories, you will lose the weight. And let's say you're down to 180 pounds. If the body set weight is 200 pounds, then the body will try to regain that lost weight by stimulating your appetite. Well, this is when the metabolic or the metabolism begins to shut down, because our bodies innately, they got to be at 200 pounds. So if it's trying to stimulate your appetite and you're not eating, then your body's going to kind of shut down, and your body temperature is going to decrease. Your organ function is going to be off, and we feel tired and cold and hungry, and we wonder, we're like, well, I'm losing the weight. Why do I feel so bad? And sometimes it's because we're trying to lose too much weight. Obesity. Obesity is a state of leptin resistance. Leptin is the primary hormone involved in weight regulation. Leptin resistance happens when the body has insulin resistance. Leptin is a hormone that tells the body to burn fat, and it is regulated by insulin. So let's go back to the basics. How does digestion work? Food is broken down in the stomach and small intestines. Proteins are broken down into amino acids. The fats are broken down into fatty acids. Carbs are broken down into sugar. And then your fiber do not get broken down. So fiber is important though. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. Protein. Protein in our body will raise insulin levels, but blood sugar is a minimal. It doesn't cause a high spike in blood sugar. Fats, very, very minimal raise in insulin and sugar. Carbs, huge raise in sugar, huge raise in insulin. When we have increased sugar in our body, insulin will store it in the liver, that we know that. Glucose is then turned into glycogen in the liver, called glycogenesis. Important to remember that. Liver has a limited space of glycogen, and the excess carbs turn into fat. This causes the body to become very acidic and a low pH. So we got to understand short-term fasting versus long-term fasting. So short fasting burns all the sugar in the body, but then we still have sugar in the liver. Long-term fasting is when we burn all the sugar in the body and all the sugar in the liver. Now, this is what we just said with protein, fats, and carbs. This is really one of the most important slides. Insulin causes obesity, causes a lot of things with our hormones, right? Stimulates the lipoprotein lipase, which is actively in the adipose tissue, which causes the obesity to happen. Causes increased cortisol hormones to be increased, which, that's a stress hormone in our fight or flight response. Produces in the adrenal cortex, prepares the body for action, raises insulin. Cortisol also increases when you do not get enough sleep. So all that belly fat is from high levels of cortisol in your body. Are you sleeping correctly? Are you going to bed at the right hour? Oh, Dr. Dan, I go to bed at 1 o'clock, but I sleep till 9 o'clock. I'm getting 8 hours. we need to understand that REM cycle of sleep. REM cycle of sleep happens when we're sleeping between the hours of 10 and 2. So making sure you're sleeping correctly between the hours of 10 and 2 and getting the right REM will help reduce those cortisol levels. And what's interesting about it is when you look at this chart here, chiropractic actually is helping with stimulating the part of the body that keeps our body calm and reducing those cortisol levels. There's two parts to your nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system is the go, 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 go. That increases those cortisol levels. What helps reduce those cortisol levels in our body and helps our body relax are the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic part of the nervous system is what controls digestion. And so maybe you have a bone that's out of alignment in your lower back, pressing on those nerves, not allowing that parasympathetic nervous system to react. Really important to understand that concept because your nerves are controlling the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So do you have what chiropractors call subluxation? Nerve interference where those bones are out of alignment, pressing on those nerves, causing your digestive system not to work correctly. No pain is associated with your body. You might not even feel it. You might not have any burning or tingling or numbness, but you could have nerve interference on those nerves, not allowing that part of the nervous system to function correctly. So we hear this word insulin resistance. And what is it? It's when the body has to produce 10 times the amount of insulin to take the sugar into the cell. So one insulin receptor will grab a hold of 2 glucose molecules and take it into the cell. But when you have resistance, it means that that insulin receptor can only grab 1 glucose molecule and take it into the cell, which means your body has to produce more insulin because now you have to work twice as hard. If the insulin receptors are supposed to grab 2 molecules of sugar and now it's only grabbing 1 molecule of sugar, now your body has to produce more insulin. And guess what your body's going to eventually do? It's going to get tired. So now all of a sudden your body is going to say, you know what? I can't produce any more insulin. And all this sugar just goes up and up and up and up. And we call that, when sugar gets really, really high, we call that person what? Diabetic. Type 2 diabetes. That's how it starts, with that insulin resistance. So it's really important to understand this because if you look at this diagram over here, we can understand how our body produces insulin. When you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and no snacks in between, yes, you're going to have high levels of insulin production during that time, but low levels of insulin production in between your meals, and then low levels of insulin production while you're sleeping because you're fasting. But if you're thinking to yourself, I need to eat a lot. I need to be eating, and you have breakfast and a snack, and lunch and a snack, and dinner and a snack, your body is constantly producing insulin to take that sugar into the cell. So you're always stimulating insulin production. And you're not allowing your body to rest. And that's how it can fatigue out and cause too much insulin and get into that resistance. So eating more meals does not aid in weight loss. False statement. Big myth. Eating frequently keeps blood glucose from becoming too low. Now, breakfast, the meal that breaks our fast. You know, it's interesting when you talk about breakfast because everybody thinks that as soon as they wake up, they need to eat breakfast. But breakfast is just what the word says. It's whenever you want to break your fast and eat. That's what a break from the fast means, right? So breakfast was, recognized as being the most important meal, but is it? I mean, if you go over to France and you're walking around, there's a lot of skinny people over there. And if you look at what they're eating, they kind of don't always eat breakfast, you know? They sometimes will skip breakfast. Maybe have a cup of coffee and some water. That's pretty much it. When we wake up, you got to remember something. When you get out of your bed, a jolt of energy from our bodies releases growth hormones, cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. This cocktail will stimulate the liver to make glucose in our body. If you get hungry by noon, then eat. That can be your first meal. So there's no set time on when you should be eating your breakfast. And what's interesting is, you know, why is poverty linked to obesity? You know, you see a lot of people that are poor, they're heavy. Why is that? And it's quite interesting because you're thinking to yourself, they're not really eating, but why are they so overweight? And what's interesting is corn is cheap, right? Makes up 29% of all the U.S. agricultural food, and wheat is 12%. So corn is processed into highly refined carbs, including corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup and cornstarch. And wheat, which gets consumed, is more processed, like flour. So we use a lot of wheat and corn. And what's interesting is, you know, when you look at unprocessed carbs in the U.S., there's no financial aid for that. While corn and wheat receive a generous amount of support from the government with processing that high fructose corn syrup and wheat turning into flour. So that's really interesting too. Table sugar is something that we need to talk about, and we're moving fast through this because this is all important information. These are basic tools you need to understand. Table sugar, it's called sucrose, and it's 1 glucose and 1 fructose. High fructose corn syrup is 55% fructose and 45% glucose. The fructose is more dangerous because it's processed more. It's processed more. So what happens is, you know, how do we make the sugar? You know, we put it in a centrifuge machine, and it centrifuges it and gets it really concentrated. And the more concentrated it is, the harder it is in our body, because our body just has to produce a tremendous amount of insulin to get this really processed high fructose into our cell. So what's an example of that? If I have watermelon, that's a high glycemic fruit, right? But it might only have 5% carbs by weight because majority of the watermelon is what? Water. But if I take, you know, I could eat 2.2 pounds of watermelon and only get 50 grams of carbs out of 2.2 pounds, right? Because it's not as dense, it's not as processed, it's not as concentrated. But if I take corn tortilla chips from Chili's and I have, you know, maybe 50 grams or 104 grams of it, not 2.2 pounds, since it's, you know, the glycemic index is really concentrated, 48% carbs by weight, it's going to take a ton more of insulin to grab onto those sugars and take it into the body. Carbs are not fattening. Their toxicity lies in the way they are processed. The watermelon is not fattening, but it's not processed. The corn chip is processed. So, of course it's going to be fattening because it's so dense with sugar. It has so much concentrated sugar in there. So refining increases the glycemic index, right? Refining encourages overconsumption too. A glass of orange juice requires 5 oranges, right? So juicing can be very concentrated, but blending is more fiber, less carbs. So I definitely prefer blending your food rather than juicing because it's less sugar. Now, fiber. Fiber is important too. fiber in our vegetables and beans and oat bran, because there's two types of fiber. One's soluble, one's insoluble. Soluble fiber are beans, oat bran, avocados, berries. Insoluble fibers are vegetable, flaxseed, whole grains, nuts. High fiber requires more chewing, which will help in reducing food intake. Why is it so important to chew your food? Why is it so important to chew your food? And that's a really good topic. We could go on to that and do a whole workshop on why it's important. But, you know, when we chew our food, that's our first step in digesting. And so we have to chew our food really, really well before we swallow it. Because if you don't chew your food well and you swallow it into your stomach, then you have to produce a heck of a lot of acid to break that food down. And a lot of people that suffer from acid reflux, one of the things that they need to start doing, chewing more. Chewing so that the consistency of your food is like applesauce before you swallow. You will reduce the acid production in your body, and you will also reduce insulin production because fiber absorbs the water, and it also slows down food absorption, and it decreases the food intake because you feel full. Soluble fiber reduces carb absorption, which reduces the blood glucose and insulin levels. So when you have your salad with your meal, you're reducing the amount of sugar that's going into your body, and you're reducing the amount of insulin that's being produced. So fiber is huge. And then, you know, so we want to understand that, and we want to understand this processed food. So this is a great tidbit. Who's ever paying attention now and listening to this one tidbit, this is really, really, really important. You guys have heard of Bragg's apple cider vinegar. It's the best, right? Sour wine has antimicrobial properties, preserves food long-term, short-term reduces insulin resistance. 2 teaspoons of vinegar taken with a high-carb meal lowers blood sugar and insulin by 34%. That means if you take 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar when you're having a high-carb meal, you will reduce your insulin production and your glucose production by 34%. Huge. Just by taking 2 teaspoons of insulin or vinegar, apple cider vinegar by Bragg's. Now, if you have a type 2, if you're type 2 diabetic, I highly recommend this. This is something that you should be doing even before bedtime, diluting it with water, because it will help reduce that fasting morning blood sugar, especially in the diabetics where they have that sugar that increases. That will help in that sleep fasting mode. It will help reduce that sugar. This is really important. Incretin effects. Stomach produces hormones called incretins that increase insulin secretion. The GI tract with its nerve cells, receptors, hormones, and functions is called the second brain. And that's really, really important. But in the GI, you have this incretin effect, this hormone that is produced when we're eating. Now, fats, amino acids, and glucose are all stimulated by increased production, releasing high levels of insulin in your body. So artificial sweeteners also have properties of increasing insulin levels. Remember that. Because we are type 2 diabetics, we're like, oh, well, let's do the artificial sweetener. The artificial sweetener. It has been proven research, those artificial sweeteners still cause insulin productions, still cause your body to go into those insulin resistant modes. Proteins, high proteins can cause weight gain. High protein can cause weight gain, not due to the calorie content, but rather to the insulin, the stimulating effects. So don't always think that you're boosting up that protein level and you're not getting insulin being produced, because it is being produced. So watch how much protein you're taking in. Dairy, that also can produce a high insulin Whey is a dairy protein, significantly raises insulin, largely due to that incretin effect and also the sugars that are in the dairy. Fat hardly has any effect on increasing dairy, which is quite amazing. So nuts and avocado and good fats in your diet, great. Eat it because it's not going to produce high levels of insulin. Okay. So this is the hormonal obesity theory, right? This is the whole, right here, this is what it's all about, right? High insulin comes from animal protein, fattening carbs, cortisol levels all cause insulin to be raised up, which causes insulin resistance to occur. Can also be fed by very concentrated sugar molecules called fructose, such as high fructose corn syrup. Look on your packages. If you see a package that has high fructose corn syrup, do not buy it because it's too concentrated of sugar. Stay away from high fructose corn syrup because it will cause insulin resistance, immediately high level of insulin, and all of this leads into obesity. So fats, omega-6, bad polyunsaturated fatty acids, example like vegetable oils, which cause a lot of inflammation. Omega-3s are good, decreases inflammation. That's your seeds, your nuts, your walnuts, fish. Oils, coconut oil, avocado, virgin olive oil, all really, really important. Omega-3s will also decrease blood clots as well. So we want to make sure that we're doing that, especially if we're suffering from any blood clots. Get your omegas. Now this right here is what you want to be eating to keep your insulin resistant and your sugar levels low. These are the foods that are going to help you in understanding how to stay away from insulin resistance. These are the foods that are going to help you stay away from spikes of sugar. Save this on the screen, take a picture, do whatever you need to do. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I do want you to make sure that you start using these items in your diet. So I'm going to give you one time just to look at that and take that slide into account. Okay, so increased consumption of natural fats, very, very important. Don't stay away from fats. Increase them because it's not stimulating your insulin production. So, you know, eat your your butter, your coconut oil, olive oil, avocados, nut seeds. Pure olive oil, it denotes refined oils, so that's not as good. The extra virgin olive oil too, unrefined, it reduces the heart attacks and strokes. So I would go with that extra virgin olive oil, very, very important. So we have one of the last pieces of the puzzle, how to reduce the consumption. So you want to reduce consumption of your carbs, reduce the consumption of refined grains, moderate protein intake, which only means that you should be doing 20 to 30% of your protein intake, right? Increase your consumption of natural fats by 60%. Increase your consumption of fiber and vinegar. This is a big part of completing that puzzle. So when to eat? To break the insulin resistance cycles, we must have recurrent periods of very low insulin levels. How do we induce our body into a temporary state of very low insulin levels? Through fasting. Very important that we understand this because fasting has really been with us for many, many of years. You know, when hunters and gatherers, when they go out and they would gather the food and go hunt, they would come back, they would eat, but they wouldn't go out and hunt the next day. They would hunt and then they'd take 3 days off and they would fast. And then the third day they'd go back out and hunt again. So a lot of benefits with fasting, which are important to understand here. So let me see where we're at here. The transition from feed state to fasting state occurs in several stages. So we want the feeding state is the meals cause increased insulin, glucose feeds the body, excess glucose stored as glycogen in the liver, right? So this is what we want to understand with fasting. There's different parts to fasting. 6 to 24 hours after fasting starts is when your body starts removing all of that sugar in your body. So the first 24 hours of your fasting, you're removing all the sugar from your body. Well, wait, you can't stop. You've got to remove all the sugar from your liver. So how do we do that? We keep fasting. Sometimes it can take up to 2 days. You can get those strips and check to see when you're getting rid of all of that sugar. Now, how do you know when you're getting rid of all that sugar? Because then your body starts breaking down the fats as energy, for energy. And that you'll be able to tell with your ketones by doing a ketone strip and just even testing your urine or your saliva. So 1 to 3 days after fasting starts, the storage form of fat, triglyceride, is broken down into glycerol backbone and 3 fatty acid chains. So basically, that's when you can start doing your intermittent fasting. So important what I just said. If you want to do this and you want to get out of insulin resistance, the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you get rid of all your sugar in your body. You have to do a long-term fast. If you're diabetic, be careful with that. You can easily do it, but there are certain protocols in making that happen. Make sure that as soon as you start burning those ketones, that then you go into eating and you go into your intermittent fasting, your short-term fasting. Okay. Protein conservation phases. High levels of growth hormone produced to maintain muscle mass, increase levels of norepinephrine, and prevent decrease in metabolic rate. This is also very important. This is when you go into that ketosis 1 to 3 days after fasting starts. And then we're down here showing what happens after 5 days. This process is how the body undergoes a switch from burning glucose to burning fat. The body does not burn muscle until all the fat storage is used up. Really important. People are very scared of that. Oh my gosh, I'm going to burn my muscle. I'm going to get rid of my muscle. No, you're going to burn your muscle after your body utilizes all the fat first. You'll see probably 1.9 pounds per day when you're fasting of weight loss. It's quite interesting how fast it happens. So what is the benefits of the ketones? Number one, they produce far fewer free radicals than metabolizing glucose. Well, that's really important in cancer reduction, right? Free radicals running around, that stimulates cancer growth. 2, high fructose corn syrup causes enormous number of free radicals. So high fructose corn syrup causes high levels of free radicals in our body, which can cause cancer. That's really important to stay away from, right? Ketones will stimulate cells to produce more healthier mitochondria in the cell, which is the part that gives us the energy in the cell. Helps with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, heart failure, aging. Fasting and ketogenic diets will put you in acidosis. You use pH strips to monitor. So when you are actually in burning ketones, monitor to make sure that you're not going in that ketoacidosis state, that your pH is monitored correctly. And if you need more information about any of the things that we're talking about, please contact our office and we'll go into that in detail. Once you get to burning ketones, you also, listen to this guys, you also will increase your growth hormone. Yes. Guys, you want to get stronger? You want to get more muscle? You want to learn how to be bigger with your muscles? Start fasting and having your body burn the ketones. your body will instantly start producing growth hormone. It will increase your blood flow to your heart by 75%, lowers blood pressure by lowering the insulin levels. So all of these are really important things. And what's interesting is, you know, and of course these are all going into the different benefits. And then of course this is the myths about the fasting. You will not lose muscle. Your brain needs glucose to function, absolutely. Fasting puts you in a starvation mode, lowers basal metabolism. That's false. Fasting will overwhelm you with hunger. False. Fasting causes overeating when you resume feeding. False. Fasting deprives the body of nutrients. False. Fasting causes hypoglycemia. False. Different types of intermittent fasting. This is how it's broken down. 24 hours, 2 to 3 times a week. A 36-hour intermittent fasting can be 2 to 3 times a week. 16 and 8 hours of eating, 16 hours of fast. This is what I do. This is what I do. I'll try to do that 16 and 8. Longer fasting periods produce lower insulin levels, greater weight loss, greater blood flow, sugar reduction in diabetics. Can I exercise while fasting? Absolutely. Will fasting make me tired? Actually, the opposite. You'll actually see that once you go through that fasting, your energy level will increase. So, start slow. This is kind of an example of a 3-day meal plan with a 24-hour fasting protocol. Didn't really come out that great on the slide here, but you can see like what Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday kind of looks like with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Even I have desserts in here, so this is important to look at. Intermittent fasting and ketogenic diet, do not do intermittent fasting first. Do the ketogenic diet first, then after the 2 weeks go by, then start the intermittent fasting. Really important to understand that one concept. Intermittent fasting works best if done slowly. Don't go right in there, do it slow. So here's the example. You realize it's lunchtime and you're not hungry, skip it and eat a dinner. If it's too late to eat, skip and eat breakfast. So if you're hungry, eat. Don't starve yourself. If you're hungry, eat. But you'll find when you're doing this that you won't be that hungry. You'll find that your body will just start adapting. So this kind of concludes our workshop with some of the information. I hope that everybody has learned some information and has gained some valuable information on how to do this correctly. If you ever have any questions, you're more than welcome to come to our office, which is on Waters Avenue in Anderson, and check us out on our Facebook, Family Health Chiropractic Center. Our number is 813-882-8181 if you have any additional questions. Thanks for tuning in. Dr. Dan out.